Hello, everyone, Survivor Specialists. John and McKenna are back, and we are ready to rewind the episode. John, how'd you like episode 6?
Honestly, McKenna, not the biggest fan. It was a little dull for me. There was an air of predictability to it. I know Phil and Alexa kind of talked about this yesterday, and how some of the best episodes of Survivor have that predictable boot. But to me, this episode didn't land it. It gave us this predictable boot that's been building up over the last 3 episodes, and it kind of just petered out.
Yeah, I was of same mind as you. It was all right. It wasn't
it was
bad.
fine. It wasn't an egregious episode of Survivor, but it was nothing terribly special.
So we have in this episode the quote unquote merge, or the murgatory in newer Survivor language, and so we see this kind of happen in Thailand and Gabon, where we've talked about this before on our podcast, where Thailand, they had a fake merge where they said, you're all going to live on one beach, which that is what they're doing here in this season. They're living all on one beach. They have time to get to know each other, but they're kind of still in sort of tribes, sort of not.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this whole idea of this earn the merge segment in New Age Survivor is something predictable now. It's something that we can anticipate with 43 could anticipate it last season. They can anticipate it this season. So the terminology of you're all living on one beach isn't as tricky as it was in Thailand.
Right.
In Thailand, the way it was presented was you're all here living on one beach. And then, we get that infamous moment of Jeff going, merge. I didn't say merge. What gave you that impression?
Exactly. Yeah.
And, Sheehan's face dropping because she realized she completely tanked her game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And while it's not the same as what we're experiencing here, it's kind of the closest pre-41 example we have of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the other example is Gabon, where they have that fake merge, and they're all there for the merge feast, and have the merge feast and realize, oh crap, we're actually doing another swap here. It's not the merge. They faked them out. But to hear us talk more about Gabon, I threw John a Gabon, and we are talking Gabon on the Patreon podcast. So tune in. It is episode 7 of Survivor Gabon.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite seasons. I know that might, get a lot of flack, but I absolutely love Gabon. I think it is a very fun season because of how dislikable everyone is. And so come on, join Patreon. Get to that $10, $20 level so you can hear us talk about it, because there's a lot to talk about in that episode. It's a jam-packed episode, unlike this episode of 44.
All right. So now that they're all mingling on the beach, we get this named alliance with Carson, Jam, and Carolyn of the Three Stooges. So we kind of wanted to talk about named alliances within past Survivor seasons. I mean, we have 3 in David versus Goliath.
Well, we have 3 that involve Nick Wilson in David versus Goliath. Because there is a 4th one that is the more known one of the Brochachos, of course.
Right.
But it's not one of those smaller ones. Because the thing with the Three Stooges is it is this smaller alliance that's really trying to hide themselves and their connection. And they kind of get a luck out because Carson was swapped over to Ratu, so they can kind of hide their connections a little bit.
Yeah. So we have the Three Stooges, the Thoroughbreds, which were Nick and Elizabeth, Mason Dixon, which is Nick and Christian, Rock Stars, Nick and Mike White, obviously the Brochachos. Those are all just from David versus Goliath.
Yeah, I mean, David versus Goliath was kind of that instance where we really saw named alliances kind of becoming a thing more in Survivor. It was more of a Big Brother thing before that, where we didn't really see the names of them on Survivor as often. Obviously, like, we have some very historic ones that we're going to talk about here in a second.
Yep.
But for the most part, David vs. Goliath really put it out in the forefront, and it was all these, like,
I mean, Nick
two
used
people
that as a
alliances.
strategy. He
Yeah,
used that Big Brother alliance name as part of his strategy.
yeah, and like naming an alliance is kind of twofold. One thing, it kind of gives you a secret someone's in with, right? Like the secret thing. Oh yeah, we're the Mason-Dixon alliance. Like we're the only people who know that, and we can use that. But it also gives you that kind of that double-edged sword of it, where you better hope you don't mention one of those alliance names in front of anyone else, because they're going to start questioning it.
Yes, exactly. So we've discussed Fiji a lot, and we did a Patreon podcast on Fiji. So we have the Four Horsemen, and they have referred to themselves as that. They dubbed themselves the Four Horsemen. And I kind of love that they named themselves this, because they were this big powerhouse of four horsemen, and they just crumbled.
Yeah, it's probably one of the shortest lived alliances that we're going to be talking about today. It kind of came out of a weird merge twist that we're also going to be talking about today that kind of led them to this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Four Horsemen, I really wish they had given us the rundown of which of them represented each of the Four Horsemen, because that would have been a lot of fun to discuss. Maybe that's something we'll do later, but Edgardo,
Patreon just exclusive drop.
Yeah, but Edgardo, Alex, Mookie, Dreams, like, it's also one of those ones that on paper it makes sense why these four came together.
Mm-hmm.
But just watching their downfall is so entertaining.
We've also got the Three Amigos. We've discussed Reynold, Eddie, and Malcolm before, and they are. They're kind of very similar to the Four Horsemen for me, in that they both crash and burn. They both are comprised of all men, and they try and do these big flashy things with idols, and they both fail.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most entertaining part of it all, where like they do these flashy things with idols and then they just still fall apart because of it.
Yep.
Because they're just like not the greatest idol plays.
Exactly. Then surprisingly, we have two alliance names dealing with coconuts. So we have the Coconut Bandits in Tyson and Jervis, which one of the most hilarious duos on the island, I feel. I just loved them just tapping into the coconuts and drinking them and leaving them.
That's, I think, the most entertaining thing about this particular alliance is, yes, Tyson and Jervis were working very close collectively, but the fact that they were called the Coconut Bandits didn't have anything to do with their game relationship. It was the fact that they were just smuggling coconuts, and they found a way to make it look like no one had drank out of the coconut.
Yeah, they were tapping them with all sort of, like, they'd use the something that they had at camp, or like they'd crack open the coconut, or like they do open them in different ways so it's not as suspicious as opening the coconut one way. And then we have the coconuts in Heroes, Healers, Hustlers of Dr. Mike and Joe.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I actually kind of forgot existed until you reminded me about them. But it's an apt name for this duo. And I think they both knew that. They were both a little more of the eccentric characters on that season.
Mm-hmm.
And, they worked well together until they couldn't anymore.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite alliances, the Black Widow Brigade.
I mean, we can't really talk about named alliances without talking about the Black Widow Brigade. Arguably one of the most well-known, obviously coming like pretty soon after the Four Horsemen, who are actually, like, the Four Horsemen is our oldest dated back alliance name that we're talking about today, because it's kind of like that first instance of people talking about themselves with a name on the show. And the Black Widow Brigade, it's just an iconic group of people who or of women. I shouldn't even say people. I should say women who came together. And like you can say Black Widow Brigade, and everyone, even like casual Survivor fans, know who you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I feel like just like the Four Horsemen and the Three Amigos kind of go hand in hand, I think the Black Widow Brigade and the Coven go sort of hand in hand. Granted, they're not of the well known of Parvati, Amanda, Suri, etc. But they're the Coven is also this group of women who are just making badass moves to disrupt the power.
Yeah, and I think I think the big difference we have with these two alliances, and like because I think the Black Widow Brigade, it feels a little bit more in line with the Three Stooges. I'm not saying that the Three Stooges are anywhere near the same caliber of players as these people, but what I'm saying is they have their alliance within this merge, and they're slowly working to manipulate things around it, which seems to be based on the conversation Carolyn and Carson had in last night's episode, how the Three Stooges want to approach this merge.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Coven kind of felt more like backed into a corner and had to fight for it. Now, granted, with how things went this episode, with Jam Jam getting his name thrown out there as the alternate vote, maybe that is how the Three Stooges have to operate in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not 100% sold on the fact that the Three Stooges don't just move on from this vote and don't get mentioned again for like 3 or 4 weeks.
True. And for those that don't know, the Coven are Ciara Easton, Abby Maria, and Kelly Wentworth. And then we're going to go to Cops R Us.
It's the only one to appear on 3 separate seasons and get mentioned in 3 separate seasons. It's probably one of the more obvious pairings ever. The necessity for a name for these two people, not really needed, but
they also have a 100% win percentage.
I guess this is the alliance that has won the most seasons of Survivor, so maybe it's just the most successful in Survivor history, despite the fact that they always turn on each other early in games. But still, it is what it is. It's an iconic one that I'm really glad we got back in Winners at War for both of them to kind of have that full story arc, because we didn't really see Cops R Us excel in either Cagayan or Game Changers, because one member of the alliance was voted out early in both of those seasons.
Exactly, yeah. And the last one we have to mention is the birthplace of the Survivor Specialists. It's obviously Stealth R Us, led by the specialist Philip Shepard himself.
Yeah, and Stealth R Us actually appeared on 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But not with the same iteration of people, because it wasn't it was a large alliance was the thing, right? And I think while most people remember Stealth R Us from Redemption Island, I feel like
more as Caramoan.
Well, I was going to say like Stealth R Us 2.0 from Caramoan, I think is the bigger one that sticks in minds, because it had all those ridiculous nicknames for everyone.
The Dominatrix, Serenity, the Enforcer. I think it just like epitomizes named alliances, because not only is the alliance named, you have each individual person feels like they have a quote unquote role in the alliance by having their personal name within the alliance.
Yeah, I think we're finally at a point in Survivor.
Shepard, it's kind of genius.
Yeah, I know. It kind of is. But he's kind of taking out of the Boston Rob playbook at that point too, right?
Right.
So, but I think we're actually at a point in Survivor where we could get a Philip Shepard type character again on the show. I don't think we're too far off with it, with the casting we've had in the last few seasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Stealth R Us 3.0 at some point.
Are Carolyn and Philip Shepard not similar?
they do kind of have that same like eccentric qualities to them, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
In all
Heard
the
it
best ways.
here, Carolyn. Please start Stealth R Us in this season, or if you return, please listen to us here and start the third coming of Stealth R Us.
Yeah.
We are now going to move on to the challenge, where they fight for the merge. And the first thing that we are going to note are the danger balls, the giant, massive balls that they have to push. So in Africa, going back to season 3, they had to push this giant ball through a course back and forth. So like people were getting run over by them, but it was a lot harder of a material. It seemed like these were just giant exercise balls.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the material used for them is now, because it was kind of that leather bound material back in Africa, right? And I don't know, because I actually think this challenge is getting more and more dangerous every season we see it at this point. Because they're adding these absurd obstacles at this point where it's like, okay, everyone, get under this giant heavy ball to push this thing over this hurdle, and hope it doesn't crush you.
Just get good, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you kind of deconstruct the ball and throw someone inside of it. So we have that version of the danger ball, where we see it obviously in Samoa, Heroes versus Villains last season. And then this iteration where it's kind of just a bouncy ball.
It's really big and like half buried to start the challenge.
Yeah. My girlfriend was like, you know what? I think sand is the real enemy here. Sand is going to take out everyone in Survivor because, we have the Matt. What did him in was not the fall. Matthew, sorry. What did him in was not the fall in the rocks. It was the digging in the sand. The challenge digging for balls and go wrong. Sand took out Caleb. So, I mean, they could just get killed by this ball in the sand, and it's just the sand's fault.
It's true, but sand is a pretty consistent thing in Survivor, as we've had it on literally every season. It's maybe the only constant in Survivor other than Jeff Probst.
I wouldn't say it's the only constant, because we just talked about Africa. There's dirt.
There was definitely sand in Africa. Do you not remember that terrible water hole?
Oh yeah. That's right. Anywho, what you've all been waiting for, the tree puzzle. My complete shock, seeing this tree puzzle pop up in this episode. I was just enraged because I'm like, they have to know about all these Etsy shops and stuff producing these puzzles. And this is one of the most common ones. And after Winners at War, it blew up. The tree puzzle was being sold everywhere. You can't redo this without expecting a Carson.
But the thing is, like, Survivor likes that, right? Jeff has gone on record saying he really likes the fact that people are preparing for Survivor this way, doing their homework, right? I don't know. Like,
but then slightly change up the pieces, the shapes, like make it the tree puzzle, but like make the shapes not the same. Like make the puzzle pieces different, where they're practicing the mechanics of these puzzles, the visual aspect of these puzzles. But like, I just feel like it's I just feel like we shouldn't have that clear of an advantage going into a challenge.
I think give it another 3 seasons at this point. And why I say that is 47 is going to be the season that's most impacted by Carson doing this with puzzles, because they'll have seen this entire season before it's filmed.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've had people talk about practicing puzzles beforehand, right? David Wright mentioned it in Edge of Extinction, that he has an entire like binder full of Survivor puzzles that he practices all the time.
I mean, Evie in 41.
Which is probably like the most egregious one, because like that's the point where Jeff was like, yeah, that's great, keep doing that. And I think there are a lot of returning Survivor players who like practice these type of things all the time. Joe Anglin does it with endurance challenges. Like, these are things that people can replicate, and it's frustrating. But can we even get mad when it's not even like the 3D? Because like one of the biggest points of contention is like Carson 3D prints these puzzles and then solves them. With this tree puzzle, like you said, you could buy this on Etsy for $25. Like, there's not, it's not as cost prohibitive as like the $200 3D printer. Like, but at the same time, like, if we get a full cast of people who have practiced puzzles, is there even a point in doing puzzles anymore?
I just want to say I have done this tree puzzle. I've played 3 live games. I have done this tree puzzle in 2 of them and have done it at home during the premiere of 43, when one of my friends brought over puzzles that she bought, Survivor puzzles that she has bought. So like, I feel like where a slide puzzle, if you know the mechanics of a slide puzzle, it's different because it's like an algorithm, or like a jigsaw puzzle. It's, it's basically put it together, do the border. You have theories on how to do it, not exact roadmaps.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the big problem with these specific puzzles that they're reusing, is they are solved in a very particular way.
Exactly.
And you have to do that. Like, yes, there's an algorithm that helps you solve a slide puzzle. It's not the only way to solve a slide puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a jigsaw puzzle is completely laid out and it's consistent, but you still have to like mix and match the pieces. At this point, there's just not enough variety in these puzzles. And like, we've seen different puzzles like this that have a similar skill level.
The slat puzzle, the sliding the slots, because you can change up the image every time and it will never be the same puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Or even just like alternate between like the tree puzzle and the flame puzzle, because like the flame puzzle we haven't really seen a lot. We saw it in Karamoan as like that final immunity challenge. We saw it as one of the duels in Blood versus Water, and that's like one of the hardest puzzles that they do on Survivor, because there's literally no frame to it at all.
I've
right?
also done the fire puzzle before, like,
yeah. But like, and that's the thing, is like, there are other things you can do. It's just a matter of like switching them. And I get that production doesn't want to do that because they already have these on hand. It makes sense why they're recycling puzzles. But if that's the case, you have to change where they fall in a challenge, because they're not an equalizer anymore.
You have to throw it at the beginning and do it as a roadblock, or in the middle, like do it as a roadblock of, you have to pause this big like physical thing to do a mental thing and then move on. Like, it just can't be the end of the challenge anymore.
Right, because we get these big comebacks like we saw Carson do last night, where it wasn't even a problem for Carson. Carson just knew this puzzle immediately. He knew exactly what he needed to do. Like, Matt didn't even have to be beside him. Matt probably slowed him down at solving this puzzle. Whereas, like, even if you look at some of the earlier instances where we see this exact puzzle in, like, One World, where the women come back and they have fallen behind in this challenge, and this puzzle acts as an equalizer so that they can catch up, and they barely beat the men with this puzzle. Like, Sabrina just gets there to defeat the men, but we don't get that opportunity here. In fact, if Jamie hadn't struggled on that wall, this would have been even more of a blowout, because there was no chance that the group that didn't have Carson would catch up at that point. So again, like, if you're touting the puzzle as the great equalizer, it's not an equalizer if people with a better memory are being rewarded just for having the foresight to practice it rather than having to solve it.
I think the best iteration of this tree puzzle is actually the first time we ever see it, and that's in Worlds Apart. And
Because you saw it in One World.
Oh.
One World was before Worlds Apart. I know they both have world in the name. It's really confusing.
I could have sworn that was the first. Anyway, so Worlds Apart is when my favorite iteration of when we see it, because they get to choose. Do you want the visual puzzle? They don't know what the visual puzzle is. Do you want the visual puzzle? Do you want the least amount of pieces puzzle? Or do you want like a medium kind of jigsaw-y puzzle? And it gives them the option of like, oh, this visual puzzle could be the fire, the tree, like it could be these reused puzzles. It could be a sure thing of a jigsaw. Okay, great. Let's just throw it all together. It's plain and simple. Or that 5-piece that, Spencer broke in Second Chances because he was like, oh, that was the one that wasn't used. So I'm going to memorize it because that'll come back again.
Well, and that's the big thing. Like, that's the bigger comparison we have with, like, this Worlds Apart puzzle and this episode is that's the first time, like, the most infamous time of a puzzle repeating in consecutive seasons to a point where someone could memorize it and use it to their advantage is when Spencer does that for Cambodia because he sees what the puzzle is from Worlds Apart.
Yeah. Anywho, I did not like the tree puzzle, and it's not that I don't like the tree puzzle. I think it's a great puzzle, but you just either have to change it up or do something, because us nerds who watch Survivor a lot will know what the heck is going on.
Honestly, one of my favorite parts of challenges in Survivor, and I'm not a big challenge guy. I understand their purpose in an episode, but like I'm here for the social strategy when it comes to the game. Yeah. But one of the things that excites me about challenges is seeing new design puzzles. I mean, like, oh, that's neat. I wonder how they came up with that idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first iteration of that tree puzzle, holy crap, great. That was cool. And then, we're getting into this era of super fans. So you kind of have to gear your game toward the super fan who's going to know everything. And if they don't, great. It could work out more in your benefit. But like,
yeah, I mean,
you have to assume that they know how to solve these puzzles.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also just a consequence of constantly being in Fiji. You don't have that inspiration to make other puzzles, because if we look at a lot of historical puzzles in Survivor, like going back to Guatemala with the Mayan calendar puzzle, or the dragon puzzle in China and stuff like that. Like we're looking at puzzles that are inspired by the themes of the season. Which again, tree not a theme this season. There's a medieval theme, right? Like, yeah, that's it. Make them build a castle.
Yeah, like let's do the puzzle that you have like the certain number of pegs like that fit in, like the lighthouse puzzle, that kind of thing. Bring that kind of puzzle back, because it's the same kind of mechanism, but you don't know how exactly to put it together if you make it, a chess piece, to bring back Phil's rant of chess pieces.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot they can do. But I'll get to it eventually. We'll move on. I promise. Let's move on to this merge feast. But it's a merge feast, but they're not merged.
Right. Well, half of them are.
That is true. Half of them are merged.
So these people that have made the merge, they get to eat. 6 people get to eat, and 6 people do not. They suck. They do not get to make the merge. So sad. The biggest thing that I related this to was the Game Changers twist on the merge feast, where Jeff was like, you all can have a cracker, or if 2 people don't have anything, you all can have this giant feast. And Brad and Ty were just like, you guys have it. It's totally cool. Enjoy. We're just going to be listening off on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like how this sits in the current era of Survivor. Like this idea, like half of them get a merge feast
Mm-hmm.
because they earn the merge and the other half don't. It, especially when there are less rewards and they're not getting more opportunities to eat like this. Although I will admit, like, it seemed really weird that like we finally got to a Survivor merge. It's like it was a charcuterie board. That's like, okay, that was like 3 years ago that these things were big. Survivor, you're a little lacking. I get, you had to take a year off, but we're just catching up to that trend now.
Yeah. So that's kind of just like our biggest relation was that game changers merge feast. But then we also have Fiji. We're going back to Fiji. Hey, Celestina. And talking about Michelle Yee and that whole like weird twist.
Yeah, so Fiji was really weird because they merged and then immediately were broken into tribes again and had to do a tribal challenge. So instead of this iteration, again, it's one of these like earn the merge with not really earn the merge situations. They were technically merged already, in which half the tribe would be immune and half the tribe would have to go to tribal council and vote someone out. And while the entire tribe didn't go to tribal council here, it's kind of the same thing where half of them don't have to worry about going home or not. And they're kind of like trying to position themselves a bit, but the other half still gets all the power in deciding, okay, this is who's going to go home. And we see Michelle Yee fall victim here to the Four Horsemen, essentially. Even though like the vote was split between her and Stacy here, it was one of those weird instances where this happens. It happens in Gabon in that episode that we talk about on the Patron that you should totally visit the Patron to listen to.
Guys, go listen to the Patreon. It's up tomorrow.
And while it's framed differently in Gabon, where it's like, no, this is just a swap, you're not actually merged, it's basically the exact same thing.
Yeah. So this merge feast has just been so weird for me. And in this episode of 44, we hear Josh's name get thrown out, Jam Jam's name get thrown out, and then we hear a rogue Kane get thrown out. So for this last half, we wanted to kind of talk about weird kind of merge boot numbers, or like this person went home and didn't, like, they made the merge but not the jury, and just weird instances of these merge boots here. So
and it's funny because technically, like, by all accounts, technically Josh is not a merge boot here.
Right.
And like it's so weird because like you kind of have to consider a merge boot because everyone votes for him,
right?
And it seems really, it's one of those weird things in this new era Survivor where not technically a merge boot, but they're not in tribes. So what is it? It has to be a merge boot, but because they all haven't earned the merge, it can't be a merge boot.
The murgatory boot.
Yeah, it's like the only way to really describe that. But to me, it feels like Survivor wants to get someone out of the merge and not have them on the jury. And this is their like loophole for doing that.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back to Borneo. I will one day get John to watch an episode of Borneo, but today is not the day. We're watching Gabon, Patreon. All right. So we have Gretchen going home with 4 votes, and then Colleen, Sue, Rich, Jervis, Jenna, and Rudy all get a vote. What kind of vote is this?
The most interesting thing about this, obviously Borneo was...
Vote with your feelings. No alliance.
Yeah, it was the advent of the game. People thought alliances were like evil. Which, okay, like whatever. If that's what people are thinking, that's fine. The wilder thing about this vote is that somehow none of these votes landed on the same person.
Yeah. There's no vote that doubles up aside from the Tagi 4.
Makes no sense. Absolutely no sense whatsoever that everyone was just on so many different pages. Obviously, you had like Dr. Sean was voting by the alphabet. The fact that Dr. Sean voted using the alphabet and nobody voted with him blows my mind. Blows my mind. It's so asinine that 10 people can go in and 6 people can get votes.
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, one of them was a man. But anywho.
Sure.
Then we go to Boston Rob and Marquesas, where he makes the merge. He is on this like journey with the merge. He helped creates the whole tribe, and then they're just like, nah, goodbye. But he also has Zoe also gets votes, and so does John Carroll.
Yeah, this is another instance, I think, of early Survivor where people weren't really sure what was going on. Kathy throws that vote on Zoe, which is really interesting. I think part of it comes down to the fact that she bonded with Rob on this journey to create the merge tribe. She didn't want to put her vote on Rob, and like you can't put your vote on John because John was in charge at that point, right?
Right.
So the vote for Zoe kind of makes sense there, but I mean, this is one of the most iconic players in all of Survivor history, not because of this season, obviously, but he didn't make the merge in his first season.
Yeah. Which is wild to even think about. We've touched a little bit on this earlier, but let's go to Sarah in Cagayan, where Sarah is in this position of the swing vote, and they're just like, so I could choose to vote out this person or this person. And so then her name becomes that third name that gets thrown out. If she had just made a decision, it could have been the easy boot of, whoever side she had picked. So like this episode, everyone was going, all right, Josh, great. But then all of a sudden, Jam, it has to be Jam. No, it has to be Kane. Let's throw this just in case. So it has this kind of like weird scramble for no reason. And then all of a sudden we see Sarah go home. And here we see, it's just Josh.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way I think it almost feels like the editors are trying to frame this in like a Cagayan merge type way, where they want you to think that it's going other places. There's all that talk about Josh having an idol or not, and whether or not that's relevant to the vote. And in Cagayan, we see so much discussion about who has an idol. Is it safe to vote Tony? Is it safe to vote LJ? Like, how do we put the votes out there? They don't even vote either of them. They vote Jeffra in the end. There are so many names thrown out at that Cagayan merge. It's just like the more exciting version of what we saw last night, where, yes, there were names out there. There were, fake blunders. Because honestly, like Carson tells Brandon he told Kane and like is like oops, my bad. I think it was a brilliant move by Carson.
Kane told Brandon being like, yo, Carson said my name was out there. And Brandon was like, you done messed up.
Yeah, and Carson just like owning that. Fantastic. Great move by him. But we see all these names going out. And the difference between a great merge episode, like the Cagayan merge, and last night's episode, other than the fact that there's no actual merge in last night's episode, is that you felt anyone could go home in that Cagayan merge, especially when like Sarah's name started coming up as well. You're like, oh, could this turn on Sarah? Like, could they get the numbers? Especially with like Cass's confessionals in that episode. But
I wasn't completely sure. Like, I was 85 thinking Josh, but I was like, it honestly could be Jam here. I think they did do a little bit to be able to, put that air of suspicion in the Jam lane. I knew Kane was out. I was like, how Kane is not going home here.
I mean, Kane, I put Kane at number 1 in my power ranking. So I heard his name come out. I was like, oh no, this is just like me putting him somewhat high in my power rankings and losing them. Rip Helen. But But the thing is like the air of mystery with this episode was gone immediately when we got to when everyone was on the same beach and Franny immediately says, "Nah, Josh can go home." At that point, I already know Josh is going home because Soka just wants him gone. It's weird because they're talking about how great of a social player he is, and we did not see any of that. But that's what took the air of suspense out of it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in something like the Kagyan merge, you have these instances that are just so chaotic, right? That's so chaotic, and like there's so much going on. It's almost like if we'd be complaining about this episode if a little less happened too, probably, and it was like more straightforward. But maybe in those, if it was even more straightforward and everyone was saying Josh, we could get more character moments building towards a future, right? More character moments for like Heidi and Lauren, who are just like, hey, we're here. I guess we work together because nobody else knows we're here.
Yeah.
And if we have a few more names go out, it gets chaotic, and we're not quite sure what's going on. So it feels like we just landed in a spot where, for whatever reason, the edit could not capitalize on how many names were going out there and the fact that they were telegraphing who goes home right away.
Yeah, I mean, if Josh actually did have an idol and could play it, we'd end up in a Kelly Remington situation here with Jam Jam being the one going home here. So Kelly Remington went home because Jen played the idol, and then Haley also snagged a vote that tribal council as well.
Yeah, it's almost the exact same situation of what we have here. It's like that was the situation the 44 cast was playing towards. They're like, we don't think Josh has an idol. In fact, somebody like Franny probably knows he doesn't have an idol because unless like Matt's now suspicious that he has a fake idol because Josh was saying he had the Soka idol. But that's what we were going towards. We were working towards this position. This is why you split votes. This is like the exact reason why you split votes is because of a situation like this. And luckily, we still get more Jam Jam.
Yes. And so I think the last one that I want to talk about here is the Jessica Johnson boot in Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, because I feel like a little bit of Matt and Franny vibes going on here because we had Cole and Jessica being this power duo, which we see in the preview of we're sus of this power duo. And, Jessica gets hit at this merge boot, but technically does not make the jury. And then, we could see maybe a Matt and Franny situation here where one of them is the actual merge boot coming up.
Yeah, it could be very similar. It's very dangerous being a pair going into a merge. That's just what it comes down to. Obviously, Jessica Johnson also didn't make the jury, a merge person not to make the jury, which is kind of similar to this Josh thing. Depending if you call this a merge or not, which technically it isn't, I know, but it's a merge. It's a merge. They're living on the same beach. They're all voting. It's a merge. And there was a long string at the beginning of Survivor where that first merge boot didn't make the jury. We saw it for the first
12 seasons.
12 seasons or so.
I think so. I think it ended in Panama.
And then as of Cook Islands, we had pre-mergers making the jury for one season. And then the next time we really saw it happen was Karamoan, which is the infamous one with Corinne making the merge, not making the jury, and then not even getting to be on stage because of the whole brain enhance of it all. At the finale. And then again after that, until we get to Worlds Apart, where we get Kelly Remington not making the jury. And then again, we had long stints, and now we're kind of at a point again, as of last season, where that first merge boot doesn't make the jury.
Yeah. I would hate to be that boot, because it's like you made it all the way here. You did a lot of, you dealt with the murgatory. If you deal with the murgatory, I think you deserve a spot on the jury.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, what a group of people to go on a pre-jury trip. Are they doing trips yet? Or are they like shipping them off to a different Ponderosa?
I don't know.
Either way, good group of people to be hanging out with.
Yes. Well, that's our podcast, everyone. So please tune into Patreon tomorrow, and you'll get to listen along to us talk about Gabon episode 7.
That's right. Obviously, Phil and Alexa are coming at you after every episode. Yes, yesterday's was a little late, but from now on, it should be pretty close right after the episode. This Monday, Phil and Alexa are going to be doing their predictions and power rankings with Mike Turner. Very excited to have him on the podcast this week. So make sure to tune into that on Monday. Click like, subscribe, follow us along here. We're all over social media, on the Instagram, on the Twitter. And of course, become a patron. Join us. Join the discussions on the Discord. We are always looking for more people to talk with about Survivor, about everything. So thanks for tuning in and have yourselves a good week.
Join Patreon.